Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Of course, joining me as always is my co-host, Justin Kuzart. Justin remains on paternity leave. He did send me a very adorable picture of he and baby Quinn the other day watching Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. It was super wholesome. If I had it with me right now, I'd share it with you guys. But nevertheless, you'll have, if you follow Justin, I'm sure he'll be posting a lot more there sooner than later. I'm actually flying the ship solo this week. Full disclosure, I hate solo episodes. I think that we've had maybe 3 of these over the course of 10 seasons. They only happen on certain special occasions, and I think the start of the NBA Finals would qualify as a special occasion. Just for a little bit of housekeeping, I'm going to call this a midweek episode because there's a lot that I'm not going to talk about, because I'm going to have another episode for you guys coming out early next week. But specifically, a pretty big slew of coaching hires across the NBA. The Sixers bringing in Nick Nurse, the Raptors bringing in Adrian Williams, and of course the Pistons throwing all the money at Monty Williams, a 6-year deal for him. We're going to break down all the implications of those hires for their respective teams on the next episode coming up, where I will have a guest. So stay tuned for that. That'll be a little more normal, who's balling, who's falling, all that stuff. But before I get into the intro and we get into the finals, I do want to talk about Game 7 a little bit and the Eastern Conference Finals. I do want to report, and shout out to my guy Carlton KB for joining me last episode. I do want to report that he is alive. I was a little worried after he texted me after Derek White hit the game winner in Game 6 that he might not make it through Game 7, but nevertheless, he's here. And the Miami Heat are here, back in the finals for the second time in 4 years, the second time in the Jimmy Butler era, the 6th time in the head coach Erik Spoelstra era. And those two guys are really what it all came down to for me, is why I had trouble seeing them, of all teams, being the first to get reverse swept. And they certainly made it interesting, of course. I mean, the fact that Miami had to go into Boston after blowing that lead and winning this Game 7, it is very difficult. But I think the reason, or one of the biggest reasons I had faith in them, was Spo and his coaching ability. He is probably the best coach in the NBA. He's going to make adjustments. And I mean, especially late in that Game 7 going zone, that really paid dividends for them. And I think it flustered Boston's offense. But more importantly, I think he kind of set the tone. I mean, that Game 6 winner for Derek White, if you're Miami, I mean, the stakes obviously a lot lower, but the shot in terms of the deflation element, it reminded me of the Ray Allen shot way back in 2013, right? With the game winner in Miami, or not the game winner in Miami, but the shot to force overtime. Now, again, that's Game 6 of a finals. That was an elimination game, so a little bit different. But, there were 0.1 seconds left on the clock when Derek White tipped that ball in Game 6. And at that point, it is. When you're that close to the finals and it just gets swept away from you, you do wonder, especially going back to Boston, if they have the fortitude to do that. And I think there were a lot of teams that would have wilted under that pressure. But, if there's a team that you're going to trust to get it done, given the way that their whole playoff run has been, right? I mean, going in against the Bucks, having a battle against their back in the wall with the play-in game, losing the first one to the Hawks, going late to the Bulls. Like, we know the narrative now by this point. But yeah, just a super impressive win for Miami. The X factor, of course, Caleb Martin, 26 points, 10 rebounds. And I mean, really, he was the X factor for them the whole series, honestly. Like, I mean, Jimmy Butler won the MVP, as he should, for the Eastern Conference Finals. But I mean, Caleb Martin, you got to give him credit. He was really close. And I mean, in Game 7, a lot of times too, it's who's going to step up and be that hero. I mean, Jimmy had 28, Caleb Martin had 26, like, just consistently knocking down shots. I mean, 11 to 16 from the field, 4 of 6 from beyond the arc. Like, he really, Miami's at a point where, with all the injuries that they've had, they just don't have the depth anymore. Like, you've got Kyle Lowry coming off the bench. Tyler Hero, of course, we know hasn't played really all these playoffs. And Bam Adebayo just hasn't been consistent of a scoring threat enough. You just got to wonder where the offense is going to come from. Is it going to be like a Gabe Vincent type? Is it going to be Max Strus? And Gabe Vincent's another guy who is dealing with an injury right now. I mean, he missed Game 5 with the ankle injury. I thought that was a big one that Boston really took advantage of in that game. But yeah, I mean, definitely the X factor there for Miami, Caleb Martin. For Boston, it's tough. I mean, they just ran out of gas, it seemed like. And I think for Game 6 and Game 7, in one hand, you hang your hat with the sense that I don't feel like Boston really played that bad in either of these games. Like the offense was flowing. I thought they got good looks. It's just a make or miss league sometimes. And Boston just unfortunately had two of the worst shooting games of their season when they needed to. And I mean, the other reality too is that Jason Tatum got hurt on the first play of the game. I mean, once he just clearly wasn't the same. Like once he tweaked that ankle, I mean, he was able to gut through it. He played 42 minutes, but I mean, you could tell Miami was going at him a little bit on defense. And I mean, only 14 points. Like it just seemed like his ability to be the number one option was gone after that play. And I'm not gonna lie, I tweeted that I finally was at the point where I thought Jaylen Brown might really be better than Jason Tatum, and maybe that's a little hot takey of me, but I mean Jaylen Brown, yeah, it's just a game to forget. Like this was a chance for him to really etch himself in as the key number one guy on that offense. When they need him to step up, like they needed him to be a Batman and Tatum to be the Robin type, and yeah, he just was pretty bad. I mean, 1 of 9 from beyond the arc. He had 19 points, 8 of 23 from the field, but it just really wasn't efficient. 8 turnovers, by far the most. I mean, the rest of the team combined had 7. It just really tough. And I think that was the biggest thing where the turnovers were killer. Like the Heat did a good job of forcing Jaylen Brown to use his left. And I just think, again, give credit to that game plan, but they really made life difficult for him. Derek White had a good game, not really that great from the field, but he had 18 points. You know, he's a guy that beyond the game winner, I think Boston really relied on and stepped up this series. I mean, the other reality is just Malcolm Brogdon nowhere near 100%. I mean, he played 7 minutes in game 7, non-factor in game 6, basically. I mean, that's brutal. You talk about the sixth man of the year and a guy who, with Boston, it was their depth all season, right? And in a way, having a guy like Grant Williams who was out for large portions of time, I thought he came in and played well, not necessarily in game 7, but over the course of the series. But it becomes a war of attrition. They haven't been able to keep Rob Williams on the floor consistently enough. He only had 14 minutes in game 7, and I think that one's probably the most disappointing because Rob Williams is a certified difference maker when he plays. Like he's arguably the best defensive player on the floor anytime he's on the floor. And that's on a roster that's got Bam Adebayo, or that was in a series, I should say, with a team featuring Bam Adebayo, who's no exactly a slouch over there either on the defensive end. But yeah, only 8 out of Horford, only 9 out of Smart. Horford in particular on the offensive end just really hasn't been able to be relied on as much consistently, it felt like, in this playoff run. But, and it's disappointing for sure because you battle all the way back and, you got your chance to make history. I think, and in a way they did. I think Boston is one of only 4 teams to ever even come back from 3-0. Like the fact that they were able to get back here, and especially in game 6 with how poorly they shot, the fact that they were able to steal that game, like you really, in a way you feel good about it, but yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. If you're Boston, we've talked about the eliminated teams and how disappointing is it. And you compare them, of course, to their arch rivals, the Lakers. And, I think the Lakers exit was disappointing, but they blew half the roster up. Like Boston, it was title or bust being in the finals last year. Like this is a team that's desperate to get over the hump, or this version of the team, I should say, with Tatum and Brown and Al Horford and Marcus Smart. Like these guys have all been together for a long time. They're really trying to get this done. And now you go into an offseason with questions. They're going to have to spend a lot of money. And with the new cap threshold, you are looking at the reality of paying Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown $550+ million next year. Now, on one hand, they pretty much won every year they've been in the league, right? Like they've been multiple conference finals runs. They've been in a finals. At the same time, though, that's a lot of money in the new cap to just give to 2 guys. And you wonder if you'll be able to fill out the depth at that point. Cause it's been the depth of what's got them there as well. They slipped a little bit defensively this year, but the core of the roster was largely the same. And in a way, maybe they sacrificed a bit of defense for offense when they went out and got Malcolm Brogdon and kind of went heavy on the guard position. That was a weakness for them last year. And maybe they went to address it that way, but I still think they run it back one more year. Like Jaylen Brown is a restricted free agent and he's under contract. They're not really worried about him walking out the door yet. And I don't know why they would. I mean, you're so close at this point. Again, Tatum gets hurt the very first play of that game. You feel good with the way the conference is running back next year. Like it's definitely a bitter pill to swallow the way they went out. I mean, it's the same way for Milwaukee, right? Like, you were these bona fide stud teams all year. You have title or bust expectations, and you end up losing to an 8 seed. But I also would argue that Miami is not your typical 8 seed. They've been here before too. It is just, again, to me, just so shocking that this version of the Heat is the version that's able to get back to the finals. Just so dreadful on offense all year. But again, give credit to Jimmy Butler and give credit to Erik Spoelstra. Like, those guys just can't be denied at this point, and this is just another notch at their belt. I don't want to get into the comparisons and the if Jimmy does this and Jimmy does that, but if he's able to pull this off and they win this title, wow. Well, I mean, talk about one of the more impressive individual runs that we've seen, at least since Stark in 2011. I don't know that it'd be better than that, but we'd certainly have to put it up there with the best individual runs in NBA history. Welcome everybody to the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Again, joining me usually is my co-host Justin Kuzart. He remains on paternity leave. I am flying the ship solo this week, so please, bear with me. Might stumble, might drink some water. Who knows? That's the fun of doing a solo episode. But leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad, or read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music, Stitcher. Anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. If you're not an Apple user, of course, you can watch a video version of the podcast. You can see my smiling face in front of the camera, and video versions of all the other podcasts, of course, as well. Just subscribe, search Drive and Dish NBA podcast on YouTube. And now a word from our sponsors. We are officially here. And in a way, again, shout out to the Celtics for extending the series, because we looked at one point like we were going to go a whole week without NBA basketball, but the Eastern Conference Finals going 7 spared us of that. But now it is finally upon us. The NBA Finals are here. Denver versus Miami. I am recording this on a Wednesday night, so game 1 is tipping off tomorrow. I did want to sneak that in here just before it started, get a good honest prediction in and break down the X's and O's, of course. My schedule and plan to record the next one, I should say, the next full episode I was talking about in the intro, is going to be after game 2. So we'll have 2 games there. And, of course, they'll let us know all our thoughts on that. But yeah, I mean, previewing this series, look, I'm going to just be blunt off the rip. I think Denver is going to win this series in 5 games, and I think it's kind of going to be light work. And that sounds really disrespectful after all the things that I just said about Miami and all the accolades I've given to Jimmy Butler and Erik Spoelstra. But, when you talk about the job that they've done to get here, being the underdogs in basically every series against the Knicks, I just think Denver's firing on all cylinders right now. Jokic looking like the best player in the league. Jamal Murray has completely elevated his scoring. Michael Porter's knocking down shots. KCP's knocking down shots. More importantly, Aaron Gordon, probably the most important player in the series outside of Jokic, in my opinion. I know that sounds kind of crazy with Jamal Murray, but, Aaron Gordon is going to likely be the guy who is on Jimmy Butler most of the time. And look, this is a guy who's played pretty admirable defense against Kevin Durant, against LeBron James, these playoffs. Like, he's really stepped up to the task. Defense has always been his calling card in the league. That's what Denver brought him in here for. Realistically, if he's giving you 14 points, but if he's playing, and he's going to have to, like, Jimmy's going to be the biggest test. He obviously, he busted Drew Holiday in the first round. It's a pretty great defender right there. I think that goes without saying, but Aaron Gordon's been absolutely phenomenal. I think, he's the big X factor here for Denver. On the other hand, for Miami, look, we know what Jimmy's going to do. It's the question is who's going to do what. Now, there's a chance you get Tyler Hero back in this series. I'm weirdly hesitant about bringing Hero back just because you are in rhythm. Like, if you add another, because Tyler Hero's been a starter, like he's been a lead guy on that offense. I don't know that he's going to be 100%. He obviously hasn't played in multiple weeks here now. And is he going to be able to just come in and adjust right away the highest level that you need to in the NBA Finals? Like, if there's a way to ease him in off the bench, I'm definitely not saying don't play him, but I'm saying the way things are going right now, I don't think you need to rush him back either. Like, you don't want to disrupt the flow of your offense. But we know what they're doing with Jimmy Butler. To me, it's Bam, and it's not just on both sides, or it is on both sides of the floor, I should say. Defensively, I mean, he's going to be the main guy to guard Jokic. Like, Jokic has looked unstoppable, and I'm not suggesting Bam is going to stop him. But if he can even just do a little bit to blunt the damage there, that'll go a long way. But for me, more importantly, it's offensively. It's going to be, he just hasn't been consistently scoring threat enough over the course of these playoffs. And when he is, it just elevates the ceiling so much higher. Like if he can consistently get you 18 to 20 points a game, instead of, for example, the 12 that he got you in game 7, like when he just at times has looked completely uninterested in offense, then yeah, I think that that's going to doom you. I don't think they're going to have enough to just flat out keep up at that point. Like they're going to need 28 out of Caleb Martin every single night if they're going to try to keep up with Denver. Like again, the way they're going right now, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, like they just have so much firepower. And I hate to boil it down to such a simple sentiment, but it is for me. Like I don't know. And again, give Spo the credit. If he's going to be the coach to do it, maybe he can find a game plan to slow Jokic down. But they're really going to have to step up. I mean, big time on the 3-point percentage. They're really going to have to knock down shots. I think that'll be huge. And again, they're going to need Max Strus consistently to be giving you the scoring threat. They're going to need Gabe Vincent to look completely healthy. We'll see what Tyler Hero does. I'm not really, again, I worry about the flow so much there. I'm interested to see what Bam can do and what Jimmy can do defensively against Jamal Murray. Like that's the other thing too. Like, we talk about who's playing what on Jimmy. Jimmy on the defensive end, if he can slow Jamal Murray down, I think that'll go a long way. But the 2-man game between him and Jokic has just been so unbelievable right now. And this is really one of the best offensive playoff runs that we've seen from this Denver Nuggets team. I mean, it's fitting that they're already on a historical trip, their first one of the finals, but I can't really, like, I host a basketball podcast. I'm supposed to be giving you a reason that I think this maybe could have a chance to go longer. And the only thing I can come up with is that Jimmy Butler and Eric Spoelstra are really gritty. Like they're going to figure it out. But the thing is that even the coaching advantage, I don't think is super drastically skewed towards Miami. Like Mike Malone to me is one of the better coaches in the league. Also, shout out to tenure, by the way. This is a 10-year coach finals matchup. Spo, the second longest tenure coach in the league, obviously only behind Pop in San Antonio. Mike Malone all the way up to 4 now in Denver. So definitely a lot of familiarity and a lot of patience. I think that's the story of building both of these teams. Miami, for all the development they've done, has been a lot of free agents, but it's bringing free agents in that weren't necessarily big guys. But when you talk about that Heat culture that is on full display here, obviously Jimmy's the big one, but Bam is a draft pick. Gabe Vincent is somebody that is really developed under then Strus, Martin, run down the list of guys. I mean, Lowry is the only other one who really is playing significant minutes that they brought in from outside. Duncan Robinson is basically a homegrown guy. Miami's where he broke out at. Denver, it goes without saying. You draft Jokic, you draft Murray, you draft Michael Porter, and you take the risk there. You trade for Aaron Gordon, and you go out and, you kind of, I'm trying to think of the analogy I want to use. Like you go out and you get the finishing pieces more or less, not an analogy, but whatever. With KCP bringing him in as a free agent, with Bruce Brown going to get him at the trade deadline, and was a pretty unheralded move, which has ended up paying obviously huge dividends for them. Denver's obviously really short in their rotation. I don't expect them to go anything crazy here. I think we're expecting 7 to 8 guys. Miami's the one where, maybe they really try to experiment and just throw whatever they got at you. But even with them, I think they're just almost out of bodies at this point. And if anything, again, with Tyler Hero potentially coming back, they could be one of the few areas where they could get an addition here late in the season. Again, don't know how effective he'll be, but they're going to need to punish them defensively with the 3-point ball. Something that, of course, didn't register for them in the regular season, but something that has gotten significantly better in the playoffs, as pretty much everything for Miami has. I'm excited for this series overall. Like in terms of the matchups and squads, like I think these are likable guys. I think there's a lot to root for here. Obviously rooting for Jimmy Butler to get his first ring, like he's already a Hall of Famer, but that would just be the icing on the cake. For Spo, it would be the first ring post LeBron, obviously second trip post LeBron, but hasn't quite got back over that hump. For Denver, obviously it goes without saying, for Jokic, it's already been his coming out party, but if you add that to his list of accolades, 2 MVPs already, what it does for Jamal Murray, what it does for Mike Malone, who I think has been one of the more underrated coaches here in the NBA for a while. Like, he's been great all the way going back to Sacramento. Like, even, during that whole era of basketball, like, he and DeMarcus Cousins were really, he was who got the best out of him in Sacramento. Like, in an era where Boogie had the reputation for clashing with coaches, he and Mike Malone got along great. Like, I was really, to this day, am kind of surprised they let him go. Like, they had a winning record, I believe, at the time. And again, that was in an era where they weren't winning. That was a long way before the Beam team at this point this year. But yeah, shout out to Mike. He's been on the Petty tour too, all postseason long, which I've really enjoyed. His press conferences have been super entertaining. Again, thank you everybody for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. I know this one is definitely a little shorter, but wanted to at least give you guys a little bit of a preview before we get in here into the NBA finals. I'm definitely more excited to recap the games coming up. Like I said, I'm going to have a full episode. We'll talk all the other coaching hires as well, coming up after game 2. So stay tuned for that. I will, again, follow Justin at Justin C on the air. If you want to see adorable baby pictures, you can follow me at Refuse to Lose. Subscribe to the podcast, watch the video form on YouTube. Just search Drive and Dish NBA podcast. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad, or read us on the podcast. We are everywhere else you can find a podcast. But yes, happy NBA finals. Again, my pick is Denver in 5. I'm putting it on the record. If I was wrong, again, y'all know where to find me, but we will see you next time.